In this video, we're going to look at callbacks in JavaScript and exactly what they're used for and how to go ahead and implement them. And it is extremely easy, and the term callback is often people find it confusing, and what's a callback, why do I need to use a callback, but in actual fact they're extremely powerful things to it's powerful to implement them because of the functionality that you see on the other side. So for example, at the moment I'm looking at this piece of code here through the eyes of a developer who's using this add method on our app object. So don't let this confuse you. We'll run through each part of this and see what's happening here. Now what's happening is I've created this add method. The code is inside app.js. That's the code that we're going to be creating as part of this callback video. And what we're going to clarify here is why do we need to use this callback and how it all works. But the first thing is to bear in mind that we have two parameters passed to this method. And the first parameter is an array of numbers. So this could change. At the moment I've got 5 and 6, but I can provide as many numbers as I want to add together here. And then there's the second parameter, which is all of this here, so this entire function here. If I just get rid of that, you'll see that there's the space for the second parameter of the method. This is the callback function, and what this callback function allows us to do is do whatever we want with the result. We're not tied in with the actual code itself as to what happens. So the method inside of app.js add can stay as it is, and we can do whatever we want with the result. So we have this callback function which passes the result to here, and then we can use this variable here, and in this case I'm just outputting the result is and then the result variable. So here when I refresh, you see the result is 11. But what we could do, for example, is if we wanted to introduce another number to this, and then even another number, and then we wanted to change the way the result was output, so we might want to alert the result, for example. It's unlikely that you would, but for example, if we used alert and then result, you'll see that we now get an alert with 22. So it's extremely powerful because what we can now do is we have control over the result of this function, so we can now do whatever we want with the result. And this isn't just useful in very small non-complicated methods like this. It's so powerful in things like working with Ajax, or to be honest anything, and a lot of code that you'll write with uses callbacks, and just simply because they're so powerful, and it allows your code to be more flexible and also look a lot nicer as well. So let's go ahead without any further ado and go ahead and actually build this method within app.js. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and define our app, which is, remember, our global object that we're going to add this method to, so we can refer to it as app.add. And then we would just want to go ahead and create a method app.add, simple as possible. So when we console log something from here, we can go ahead and from our browser call app.add, and that will give us here. So we know that that's all working. Good to test as we go. So what we now need to do is define what parameters that we want to pass to this method in order for it to work. And the two parameters that we need are the numbers array and the callback as well. So numbers and the callback. So the callback is defined as an actual parameter. Now remember, we can pass objects to parameter. We can provide objects, arrays, which technically is an object. Almost everything in JavaScript is an object. So with the callback, we can pass through a function, and this function will be run if we call it within our method. So that's basically how this works. As we write more code, it should become a little bit clearer. So let's go ahead and create the variables that we want to use at the top of the page first, and that's just going to be a result, and we're going to define that as 0 just in case that anything goes wrong or there are no numbers provided. We will be checking for that, but it's always good to define this default value anyway. So we're going to need an if statement here just to check a couple of things, and that is that the numbers array is defined and the numbers actually have some numbers in them, because of course we could provide an empty array in here. So we want to say if numbers doesn't equal undefined, and remember we're using a strict not equals here as well, and numbers.length. Now remember, length is a property that's inherited from the object prototype when we create an array, and that's just going to count the array the number of items in the array, and that will represent however many numbers you pass through. So now that that's happened, we want to go through and actually loop through the numbers. Let's go ahead and loop through them at the moment and then console log them out, just so we don't rush through this and go too quickly. So I'm going to say for number in numbers, and then I'm going to go ahead and console log number, and you'll see that this will relate to the position in the array that we pass in. So let's go ahead and actually write the code within our index.html, just so we can see how this would be actually used on a page. So the first thing I want to do is say app.add, and I want to go ahead and pass in an array of numbers. So I'll say 5 and 5, for example, and then we do have the callback function, but we're not going to actually provide that at the moment. We're just going to provide this. So over in our browser, when we refresh, number is not defined. Let's take a look at this. Oh, there we go. So numbers.length, a little typo there. So here we got 0 and 1. So that basically relates to the position in the numbers array. So rather than do that, we would say numbers number, and that will just go through and output the numbers like this. So we've got 2 5s here. If we were to change this to say 5 and 10, we would get 2 lines output there, so 5 and 10. So we now know how we can sort of iterate through this array. That's fairly straightforward. But what do we actually want to do in here? Well, we want to say result equals result. Remember, we're adding to this result here plus numbers number. So the position that we're currently at, we want to add on. So under here, let's go ahead and console log the result, just to make sure that the actual calculation of this is working. And it looks like it is. We've got 15 output here. But remember, we don't want to include any sort of predefined functionality in here. The point of this is that we want to provide the ability for the user to define a callback function here. Now this could either be a function that's already defined, so output equals function, for example. So we could provide it like this. Okay, so we could do output like that. However, what we want to do is, I just want to do it all inline because it looks a lot neater and there's no real need to define the function elsewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and define the callback function here, and I'm just going to console log callback called. So now that we know that the callback's going to be called, or well, it won't be at the moment because we don't actually have a callback here. So at the moment, that's not actually going to do anything. If I've refreshed the page and inside of here, this code's being run, but this callback is not being called at all. We're still adding up, but we're not actually calling the callback. So now all we need to do is another few lines of code to check if the callback is defined and then actually call it. So this might seem like it's going to be super complicated, but it is not at all. So I'm going to say callback doesn't equal undefined. So basically just making sure that this has been passed to the function. All we're now going to do is use the name of the property that we have created and call it like that. And that's all we need to do. Now there is a small addition that we need to take into account, but just doing this will run this function when we get to this point. So let's go ahead and just see how that looks. There we go, callback called. So we now have this callback called. What we are missing is the ability to provide a parameter within the callback, which then says something like the result is result, because at the moment this is undefined, it's not being passed anywhere. So when we refresh, it says the result is undefined. So now that we have this undefined value, how do we get this value into here so we can output it within our callback? Well, that's simple. We just call it or just pass it as a parameter to this callback function. So we just say result. Remember, we've added up the result here, we pass it to the callback, which then runs here, taking it into account here, and then we can output it within our function scope. So when I refresh now, you see the result is 15. So that's a little bit on callbacks in JavaScript. Extremely useful, extremely easy to use, and highly effective when you're writing code that basically wants to read, write, and be really, really, really flexible.